Hello and welcome to the program on managing stress during the COVID-19 pandemic. I am Dr. Lorraine Pincus, and I'm privileged to work for the Connecticut Central School District as a Youth and Family Services Coordinator, clinician, and a social worker.
And I am Dr. Donna Pincus, and I'm the Director of the Child and Adolescent Anxiety Clinic at Boston University, and also a very proud graduate of Connecticut School District.
These are challenging times for families. And as caregivers, no matter what kind of role you have, whether you're a parent, a teacher, a mental health provider, a grandparent, a healthcare provider, an essential worker, it is important to acknowledge the responsibilities you have been given in maintaining the physical, emotional, and interactional healthy functioning for young children, teens, parents, and grandparents. Families also are coping with a variety of situations they had prior to this pandemic. Some families were dealing with illness, single-parent families. Some families had situations involving two-parent homes due to divorce, or caring for extended family or grandparents. There are families that are living together as multi-generations. Well, now we are navigating another role, and that is the role of navigating online education with your children. Having a pandemic has alerted and reminded us that the true shelter in our lives is not made of wood and it's not made of brick. The shelter in our lives is each other, helping each other to build resilience by increasing protective factors and decreasing the risk factors. Today's presentation on managing stress during the COVID-19 pandemic is the collaborative effort of myself, Dr. Donna Pincus, and her staff.
Yes, I have a number of staff that I'd like to acknowledge that have contributed to this presentation, and I'm going to share this with you right now. And let's see, there's a number of people that I want to acknowledge, and that is Alyssa McCarthy, Dr. Kelsey Hudson, and Annie Dantowitz, all staff members at the Child Anxiety Treatment Clinic at the Center for Anxiety and Related Disorders at Boston University. And so we're going to begin now. I'm going to continue to show some of the slides, and what we've put together for you today are a number of different perspectives on how to reinforce healthy coping during this very difficult time. So we'll begin with the purpose of the workshop.
So the purpose of this workshop is to help our teachers, our parents, our grandparents who are facing the multiple roles that they've been given, and to help you guys to be able to manage the stress, the stressors, and to help other people, because we're all in this together. Our workshop discussion outline is going to include 3 major topics: the stressors that people are experiencing, the common responses to those stressors, and mental health and wellness strategies. So some of the stressors in the COVID-19 pandemic, I'm going to first list them, and then we'll look at them a little bit better, a little closer. Very first and foremost is our fear of getting sick, our fear of getting this illness, because it's still a mystery as to how people catch this virus. And so there's anxiety about, should I wear this? Should I wear that? Should I put on a mask when I'm walking down the street if there's no one else there? There's a fear of not knowing and feeling out of control. There's a fear of being a carrier. Well, I have no symptoms, but maybe I'm a person who could spread this illness without realizing it. So there's a fear of spreading the illness. There's concern for the people we love very much. There's concern for our family. I don't want my children to catch this. I don't want my parents to catch this. I want my friends to stay safe. My colleagues and my coworkers are also people who are very important to me. I don't want to lose anybody in my life. The changes in my life also are stressors. My family is together at home throughout the day. We're not used to being together 24/7 throughout the day. That can become very stressful. There's changing in how my kids are going to school. Now they're online in school, and they require more of my support, more of my help, and more of my interacting with teachers online in order for us to be successful in educating our children. Because I am now a very active partner as a parent in educating my child. Things are different now, day to day at work. I don't have colleagues that I'm working next to. I'm working on my own at home if I'm fortunate enough to be able to work at home. But in doing that, the stress, which I feel lots of times, has to do with learning new technology. Zoom, Google Hangout, things that I never heard before, and perhaps you haven't either. Finding different ways to connect with students and families and with my friends. We used to be able to get together for coffee. The children used to be able to get together and play. That's not happening anymore the way it used to. Financial problems and worries are big, very, very important stressors right now. So many people have experienced job loss and are worried about whether or not they're going to be able to pay their rent or their mortgage, or whether there's going to be enough food. People go to the supermarket worried about whether or not they're going to have what they need on the shelf. There's increased caution with regard to daily activities. Frequent hand washing. I better come in and wash my hands. Some people are actually saying they wash their hands so many times that their hands are now feeling raw. They don't want to touch their face and they have to be worried about that. Wearing masks or face coverings. Not everyone has masks. There's concern about previous routines. What am I going to do? I used to go to the supermarket and buy groceries or go to the pharmacy to pick up my prescriptions. I no longer can do that. There's decreased connectedness with others. It's so important in our lives to feel connected to our friends, to our family, to our colleagues, to our spiritual advisors. We're unable to see them physically, and we're missing social activities that are protective factors for us. They help us to feel connected. They give us a good picture of who we are socially, and we don't have that regular way of meeting anymore. There are concerns about our general health and wellness. Why? Well, I used to take a walk with my friends every day, or go to the gym, or go swimming. I can't do that kind of physical activity anymore. I have to figure out what else I can do, because I'm not doing that, and I miss it so much. There is less access to the activities that were mood-boosting kinds of activities. People who love running are now worried about where they can run and not running near anyone and making sure they're 6 feet apart. And worst of all, there's increased barriers to healthcare services. Well, I had to cancel my dentist visit, my physical therapy, all the elective procedures that were going to keep me okay. So those are some of the changes that are stressors that we inherited as a result of this pandemic. There are other stressors that you may be experiencing or that are affecting students and families, besides the ones that we have mentioned. So Dr. Donna Pincus is going to talk about the responses to stressors.
Some of the other stressors that many people have talked about feeling are, first, if you're a first responder, someone who takes care of others, feeling that they have to quarantine and then can't be near their family members, or people who had issues before this occurred. So for example, if you or you know someone who were suffering from a substance use disorder, maybe these are triggers like being lonely. These are triggers that might have sometimes triggered unhealthy kinds of coping responses. Furthermore, there's other kinds of things that you might be experiencing, and those can be things like separation anxiety. Very often kids experience problems and experience separation kinds of concerns. And you may notice that for your children in your lives, that those kinds of separation concerns continue. There are a number of different responses to stressors. And one of these responses is anxiety. And very naturally, in situations where we might find that we have difficulty controlling our feelings, we might experience worried thoughts. Physical symptoms in your body. So you actually can physically feel anxious. You might also notice that these worry thoughts are hard to control. And as a result, especially if you had looked online or you had had done some things where you were, for example, like reading articles right before bed, you might have trouble falling asleep or trouble staying asleep. And you might not feel quite as rested after you're done sleeping. So that might be that you're not having restorative sleep. You're supposed to feel better when you wake up. Another symptom that people have been describing, and this is very interesting to think about, is that even if you haven't specifically lost someone due to the COVID-19 pandemic, you may be feeling some feelings of grief. And sometimes these feelings may be anticipatory grief, like you're anticipating even a loss that hasn't yet occurred. You also might feel confused or helpless. You might feel angry. And you might have be thinking about the way you're either grieving not only your own losses, but other people's losses, or anticipating future losses. And very understandably, there are some feelings that you might experience and that are very normal responses. And that is, people are reporting that they often feel sad or a bit more depressed. So they feel more irritable, a little more sad or down. Maybe you're feeling tearful, or just like you have less patience, and that is very normal. Or even losing interest in the things you used to like. So some might feel more withdrawn and isolated, not doing the very fun things that used to be very part of life, and also overwhelmed, because quite frankly, we all have very many more tasks. Even though we're not leaving the house, now we're doing dual tasking with childcare or with keeping up with your job. So it's not uncommon to experience things like difficulty concentrating or focusing, having a very hard time organizing or planning or thinking about what's the next thing you're going to do, maybe some trouble managing professional tasks, and even some emotional fatigue or physical fatigue. It is not uncommon to feel somewhat sad and then also to feel, as a result, somewhat exhausted. So many people say, well, you know what, I was just on Zoom meetings all day, but then I still feel really tired. Why is that? And maybe you're not eating at regular times. Maybe you're not sleeping at regular times anymore. Okay, so there's another feeling that many have reported, and that is difficulty tolerating uncertainty. And that uncertainty we are all facing. We don't exactly know what's going to happen. We don't know if half of us in the world are going to be at some point getting this. You don't know when it can occur. You can't see it. So there's a lot of uncertainty going on. We don't know if and when a vaccine will be developed. And so this, of course, can lead to a lot of what-if thoughts. That can also cause us to all experience this as traumatic. Not everyone who experiences extreme stress will feel overwhelmed by it. So some of us are going to handle this resiliently, just as you dealt with other hard things in your life. Whereas other people might feel even some traumatic reactions by watching other people experience trauma, or reading articles or news events that really can really cause people to feel somehow that they've been really affected by this firsthand. And there's a lot of research showing that you can actually experience trauma through someone else, through watching it through someone else. And that's what we call vicarious trauma. It's a form of traumatic stress, and it's similar to having some symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. Most people, though, thankfully, will not develop post-traumatic stress disorder after this. Now, there are a number of physical responses that the body, you might notice in your body, but that are happening whenever we experience any stress. And of course, this is just another type of stressor that, and so if you felt like you had increased heart rate or shortness of breath, this might not always mean that you have the COVID virus. And it's very easy to mistake those feelings of shortness of breath to assume right away that you might have those thoughts that then are feeding more shortness of breath. But this is also a symptom of anxiety. So we have to be careful not to confuse these. You also might feel a tingly feeling in your body or nausea. So sometimes when we're really focused on the source of stress, our body, because we stop feeling hungry at that moment, we're really focused on trying to either deal with whatever's bothering us. People sometimes say they feel a little bit nauseous or a little bit dizzy. And that is not an uncommon way that the body naturally deals with stress. So I want to make sure that it's really clear that you're not over worrying about whether some natural feelings of anxiety might be really like a virus, but it could just be your natural feelings of anxiety. And remember, anxiety is not bad and it won't hurt you. And in fact, can be protective. It keeps you alert. It keeps you remembering to wash your hands when you need to, because these are some things that we know are just necessary right now. And I'll mention too, a number of people have talked to us at our center, in our clinic, about wearing masks and how that even causes overbreathing, that causes you to pant or feel like you're suffocating, even though you're not. But there's not as great an airflow, so that can cause some feelings that feel very anxiety provoking. So if you're ever thinking, oh, is it maybe COVID, or is it maybe that I'm just like over breathing? You might think about it as like a 3-part model of anxiety. And at any given point, you might have thoughts that enter your mind. And those thoughts might be, oh my goodness, this is so rough. Like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get through this. I can't take the quarantine for even one more day. And as those negative thoughts are in your head, the feelings you might get are shortness of breath, rapid heartbeat. You might feel like it's difficult to you have a hard time concentrating. You may either feel hungry or not hungry. And as a result, you may do certain behaviors. And some of those behaviors might be like withdrawing or avoiding things, or not wanting to talk about it, or maybe reading more in the internet to just confirm your worried thoughts. And again, that fuels this cycle. So it is a cycle, and we have to be careful to know that we actually can control this cycle. So even in the midst of an uncontrollable stressor like COVID, there's a lot of things you can control. And one of the things is your own behaviors, how many times you're checking the media, how many times you're letting yourself just start ruminating. And so we can control our thoughts very, very well. It's the external stressors we really can't control as well. So there's not all anxiety is bad. And I think that's an important message. It keeps us safe, and it sometimes can help us perform better. And anxiety is a very natural human emotion. We describe this all the time to patients when they come into our anxiety clinic for help. And I think it's an important message for anyone to know that it is a natural human emotion, but too much anxiety is not helpful. So some have said, well, having a little anxiety actually helps me win the race when I'm running, or it helps me take a test. But too much anxiety can actually interfere. It can could cause you to dwell on negative thoughts and ruminate about them. And all the literature I know about says rumination about negative thoughts really tends to not make anything better in the world. It just leads to more sadness. So if you notice yourself falling into that pattern where you're ruminating, I would stop doing that, and kind of any other activity that you can do that's more productive or concrete or pleasurable. I would move my head in your mind. You can consciously move yourself to that other place. And you're going to want to model this for people around you. So your children, maybe it's your parents or others in your life are looking, or your students are looking to you to learn how to not let anxiety take control of them or take over. And so it's many jobs that like rest on our shoulders now is not only taking care of ourselves and trying to develop some healthy coping mechanisms, but then also to impart those mechanisms, those healthy coping strategies to our children. And we all cope in very many different ways. And so the different ways that people cope, a number of ways that people cope. Dr. Pincus, would you like to continue with the healthy coping skills?
Of course. I'm not sure about the video and how that's working with regard to.
Okay, yeah, there you are. We got it.
Okay.
So coping
Right.
skills.
So coping skills. Well, yeah, we do. We really do have. We're very creative people. We do cope in very different ways. And some of the styles of coping, I'm just going to go down the list, and then we can look at that a little bit closer. Problem solving, ways to be able to see something. Even if that happens, what else can I do? Even if I wasn't able to play ball with my friends, well, what else can I do? Even if that happens, that's what else can I do is leading us in the path of problem solving. Looking at things differently, there's always another way to look at something. Distraction, mindfulness and self-care, avoidance, these are all coping skills. Some of them are better than others, and we'll go through that. Emotional suppression.
Yeah, that is definitely an important one. You know, keeping your emotions in is not a good strategy. So some of these certainly are healthier than others.
And emotional expression through talking, writing, music, art. Those are nice ways of expressing. So now, here's the helpful coping skills. Problem solving, identifying the problem and working on a helpful solution. And it's an action-oriented kind of approach. So just because, even if I'm not able to meet with friends for coffee, or I know that some of our middle schoolers like to go to Dunkin' Donuts and meet each other there after school, or even if I can't do that, well, what else can I do to be able to connect with my friends at school? What else can I be able to do to connect with my colleagues? What else can I be able to do to connect with my family that I miss so much? Looking at things differently, try to come up with another way, other possibilities about what could happen. Well, if I'm not able to travel, what else could I do? Instead of not traveling, physically traveling, how else could I find myself in a situation where I can think about and feel as though I'm in a different place? Whether it means that I actually take a walk in a different place, or whether it means that I get on the internet and start looking at different places, or researching different places, or learning about different places. I can start to look at things differently. I can actually start to look at even being housebound in a different way. Well, this is really, in some ways, very nice to be able to get up and enjoy being here without having to run around and rush around. That's another way for me to look at being housebound. Okay, noticing if my thoughts might fall into negative thinking. Well, looking at things differently means I have to become a bit more aware of how I might have a pattern of having negative thinking, and how I need to shift that. I need to be able to see and think about things on different levels. Distraction. Distraction is another coping skill. Purposefully plan and engage in pleasant activities, which is a nice distraction. For example, some people take up music, some people take up dancing, some people get on the YouTube and start to do some kind of exercise that's offered through YouTube and that's offered online, and it's free of charge. So that's a healthy way of having a distraction. Paying attention to other things when we're hooked into negative thoughts and feelings is helpful. Paying attention to other things. Those other things could be maybe something I wanted to rearrange or clean out. Or maybe it has to do with me wanting to write some poetry. I've been speaking with some students that are actually writing music. Another very helpful coping skill is mindfulness and self-care. I say to people often, keep your head where your feet are, because a lot of times we live in the world of our thoughts. And if our thoughts are very negative thoughts, then they put our feelings or put out or encourage our feelings to be very negative as well. And that's not a healthy way of coping. So let's focus on what it is that I can control and make what I can control even better than it was before. And let me take a look and a list of the things that I can control in my life. And one of those things is my thoughts. I'd like to plan some time to take care of my physical body, my spirit, and my mind. And I see a lot of people outside walking with their family, walking their dog, riding a bike. Sometimes people are there and there's other families and they are mindful of being 6 feet apart. In terms of my spirit, it would be helpful for me to be able to do some meditation, to pray. Whatever it is that is an inner resource for you is a good coping skill. Whatever that is, whatever name you want to put on it. Focus on what is happening now versus what happens in the past or worrying about what's going to happen in the future. What's happening now? What can I do today? And I take one day at a time. And in doing that, I'm able to manage that one day at a time. I cannot manage the past. I cannot change that. And I also cannot control the future, but I can be in control of me and be in control of how I live my day. What is not helpful is avoidance and suppressing. Dr. Pincus, would you talk about that?
Yeah, so one important thing to remember is that the more you avoid the things that are bothering you or some of the things you're afraid of, like if you avoid even your feelings about what you're experiencing, and you avoid talking about it, then what can happen is it's going to come up in other ways for you, and it's going to make you feel bad. So for example, just burying yourself in screen time. Or, you know what, I'm not going to read anything about the news. I'm not going to talk about this with my friends and family. That avoidance tends to not be helpful in the long run, because we do need to process what's happening. And so whether you're enjoying better processing this by doing some, maybe you want to process it by talking with a friend, and maybe you want to process it in another way. There are a number of ways you can process your feelings. Maybe you want to write about what you're feeling. We all process things somewhat differently. But numbing your emotions, so emotional suppression, some people say, well, if I can't deal with things, like I just have another drink, or I smoke, or I use drugs. And we know that doing those things are will lead to so many other problems. It leads to addiction. It leads to just feelings where you have to deal with the withdrawal symptoms that happen after, or the feelings that are physically really painful to deal with. So one problem could easily escalate to other problems. So emotional suppression is not usually the strategy that we would recommend, because even in the short term, whereas that drink might make you feel a little bit better, again, if you have overdone it and you consistently are overdoing it, it usually can make problems a little bit worse in the long term. So when we're coping with uncontrollable stressors, so the literature shows that when it's a controllable stressor, you want to do a problem-solving strategy. Like, I've got to make dinner tonight, and I've got to figure out how to make something out of what I have in the fridge. Like, you can employ a problem-solving strategy. But we're all facing some uncontrollable stressors. And so some of the best ways to deal with that, when we can't change what's happening, sometimes we want to change our mind about it, or try to cope with it in a different way, or change our feelings about it. So it might be that we decide that we'll purposely control what we can. So I can control how I spend my day. I can control whether or not I get out for a walk in the morning. I can control whether or not I try a mindfulness strategy. And I also can control my own standards for myself. So maybe it is important to flexibly adjust those standards. Just because everyone is being productive around you, that doesn't mean, just because everyone else is doing something a particular way, doesn't mean that everyone is dealing with the exact same stressor. Maybe one teacher has got their videos going, they've got their Google Classroom, everything is perfect, and you think, oh, how come I'm having a harder time with that? Well, remember, everyone, this might be a common stressor, but there are different kinds of situations that everyone is dealing with. Some might have an elderly parent living with them. Some are taking care of young children. We cannot compare ourselves to other people here. So it's okay to let down your standards of what you would deem as a perfect teacher or a perfect parent or a perfect caregiver at this time. And again, remembering that there are some things you can control. You control what you eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You can control stopping your work and taking your child for a bike ride or doing something that you think might allow you to get some sunshine during the day. And one other thing to mention is I think that Dr. Pincus will now talk about managing how you consume information from the media.
I think that a lot of times we have many different kinds of informational resources that feel like they're bombarding us. The radio, TV, the internet, other people, phone calls, Instagram, FaceTime, Zoom, Google Hangouts. There's so much going on that's focused on this. And after a while, it gets to be overwhelming and we don't know what to think or what's true, what's not true, what's the update, and all of that increases our feelings of anxiety. It doesn't help us to manage stress. It doesn't help us to cope. So we need to really be selective with what we're going to do in terms of getting an update and be mindful of not becoming overdosed and overwhelmed with news sources. So provide yourself with a limit on how many times you're exposing yourself to news, updated news, every day, because some people are listening to the radio or have TV on all day long about updated news. And so it keeps them in a state of increased anxiety because of that. So it would be good to be able to seek some positive news for balance. And that could come from actually asking each other in your family, tell me something positive that happened today during dinner. What was something you were happy about? What was something you felt proud of that you did? Sometimes positive news doesn't have to come from outside our family, it can come from within.
Yeah, and I think those are really, really great recommendations. So some people say it's almost like you're going on a news diet for yourself. You're limiting the amount of news that you're consuming at a given point. There are a number of different relaxation strategies, and the web is filled with them. If you looked up even on YouTube or on Google, just look for quick mindfulness relaxation resources. There are a few apps that many people have said are some of their favorites, and one is the Headspace app. And there's a number of different options of ways you can set this up so that you can really tailor it to your liking of how you'd like to experience, like giving yourself some moments of learning how to be more in touch with yourself, learning how to relax, learning how to control your physical response to anxiety, and learning how to be more in the present moment, which is something that, in fact, if there was any silver lining, many people reported feeling a little bit more, that it's forced them to look at how, you know, they're not being distracted by going out all the time and driving everywhere. So they're just watching flowers bloom outside, and they are having more time to spend with family. There's another app called the Calm app. And we pulled out for you, we selected a few different kinds of meditations. Some of them are good for that kids have reported really liking. And knowing that everyone is busy, we purposely chose meditations that are very short, like between 5 and 15 minutes. And we also would really encourage you to, if you know of resources that you think would help others, to share them with each other. I read an article today about how your work colleagues now are going to become a huge, just a huge network of social support for you and mental health support. And we have to keep an eye on each other. We have to kind of make sure we check in with each other about how everyone's doing and offer to help if possible. Do you know a teacher who's struggling with setting up something or is struggling with kids at home? Can you take something off their plate? I mean, any ways you can think of helping, whether it's a neighbor or someone else, that can be extremely helpful. There are a number of additional coping strategies that we both have culled for you and we would recommend. And one is that things are a little messy right now in every realm of life. And it may be messier, especially if you're the kind of person who doesn't like messy. We have to learn in some ways some tolerance of this messiness. So there's not a clear line between work and home. Maybe you're not having quite as much time to kind of attend to taking care of making sure the house is the way you want it, or kids are in the house all day long. It's likely you can't ever have a place where it's completely clean. You might need to let go of doing things perfectly. So sometimes, you know, even though you might be 110% kind of a person, it might be okay, and you can test out, what is it like if I just got the job done and it didn't have to be 100%? So focus on what you can control. I think that's an important message of staying really focused. And the happier people I've met are more focused on just the day-to-day, helping the people they can, and doing things that they feel will increase their sense of control. We always say anxiety increases when your sense of control decreases. So the more you can do to help yourself and your loved ones create more of a sense of control, the better. Try, if you can, to create a boundary between work and home time. Now, this is not an easy thing to do, especially since sometimes it's one room is work and the other room is home, or maybe your computer is right there in your kitchen and like work and home is all kind of blended together. I had one person tell me they tried to at least take 2 laps around the house walking to pretend it was like a commute, and then landed at their computer screen, did something to make it feel like there was a boundary between work and home time. Or maybe it's just a time where you say, okay, after 5 o'clock or 2 o'clock or whatever time it is, this is my home time. Just as we might say for kids, you have to know when you need a timeout, you have to know for yourself when you need a timeout. And when is it important to walk away? When do you feel yourself? Be in touch with yourself enough to know when you need to take a deep breath, and practice self-forgiveness. So it's very natural if you feel like you've lost your temper sometimes, or if your mood fluctuates, or if you feel a little irritable. Those are very, very natural things that might happen, and it's to be expected, but that we would all be having some fluctuations in our mood because of this. But you know, there's lots of options of ways we can increase some pleasure in our lives, even though we're home. And you know, one easy thing that I think has taken off for a lot of people is reconnecting with old friends, or reconnecting with friends online. So this could be that you plan to have dinner together, or maybe a bunch of cousins decide they're all going to play a video game together online, or you know, maybe you decide that you're going to host a party, or do something where you can have everybody doing a game night, or some other type of activity that's organized, like a trivia night or a bingo, or anything that just might be fun, that sometimes you start to look forward to. And include in your rhythm of the day something that includes taking care of yourself. And that means, making time to take a shower, even though you don't have to leave and go to work, to get dressed up. Maybe it is like getting dressed in something that feels like it's work clothes versus home clothes. Some have really found a lot of pleasure in baking something, or learning a new recipe, or doing something kind for a neighbor or friend. In fact, we know that there's a lot of research showing that volunteering or giving or any kind of altruistic behavior tends to give not only to the person you're giving to, but it gives even more to the person who's giving. So there's some feelings you might feel actually like on a brain level, like you actually feel more pleasure from giving to other people. And get some exercise, and that's hugely important for boosting mood. Even a short walk a day could be a very good goal. So you might want to make your goal something that you know is somewhat doable for you. Sleep is another very important concept to talk about, because it is something that we might all feel like we don't get quite enough sleep than usual. I mean, typically, but now our schedules are completely thrown off. It could be the kids don't have to wake up exactly on time anymore. Their circadian rhythms are completely disrupted. And what I mean by that is that we kind of have a natural cycle of waking and sleeping. And if you start to mess with that and go to sleep maybe later and later and later, then you're sleeping later and later and later. And then after a while, it's hard to get back on a schedule. And it's best for us if we're awake during the light hours and then sleeping during the dark hours. And so creating a schedule, and it doesn't have to be a rigid schedule. Of course, some nights there's a fun TV show on, or you have a gathering with friends, but you'd like to do something that creates some kind of a rhythm to your day. Some found it helpful to read something relaxing before bed, but usually we recommend not to use your phone right before bed. The light that's emitted from your phone tends to keep your brain awake. And also reading disruptive or alarming news articles are not going to help with helping you feel soothed at nighttime. You could create a nighttime routine, even for yourself. And I know it sounds funny to think of adults creating a nighttime routine, but just as kids might need a rhythm for their evening, it's helpful for adults also to create, whether it is, okay, I wash my face, I put on pajamas, I read a little bit in this fun or relaxing magazine or something mindless. I turn on a dimmer light, like some kind of a small incandescent light, shut off the overhead bright lights, and kind of get my brain ready to sleep. And those are things that set the stage, not just in a behavioral way, but on a brain level, can set your stage for you to have a healthier night's sleep. You might relax yourself before bed, maybe use the Headspace app or something that you remember using before. That can be helpful sometimes to have a guided meditation. And get out of bed. What we say is if you can't fall asleep within 15 minutes, rather than laying there and stewing, get out of bed and do something else relaxing and then try again. So you want your bed to kind of be a really good cue for relaxing and sleeping. And in that note, we also say, try to not drink caffeine really close to bedtime. So, and also not exercise close to bedtime. It's better to do your exercise. Most agree that it would be better at any other time of the day rather than right before you go to sleep, because you need some time to calm down from that. So those are some strategies. And so some say, well, you know what, I don't have a routine. How might I ever create one? Well, you might think about ways to create routines, and you can do this for your children too. So some special considerations you might think about are the kinds of categories of time that is important, like having some time alone, having quality time with family, having task-centered time, like getting something done for work. And maybe you could help your children, or even for yourself, write down some activities that might fit in to each of these types of categories. Maybe alone time is, you know, something like you're reading a book, but quality time with family is you maybe preparing meals together, or task-centered time is you're getting a work task done. And you might flexibly create a schedule. Now, just because you write it out doesn't mean you have to beat yourself up if for any reason you change the schedule around. But just a sample might be getting up around 8:30, having breakfast, a relaxing time to plan your day. For a child, maybe you're doing some online classwork for a few hours. Maybe you're working together with the family to prepare lunch and eat lunch. Maybe you eat somewhere different for lunch than dinner. So create some stations in the house that kind of help to define some kind of a rhythm for the day. Have alone time with family members, or family time indoors or outdoors if the weather's okay. Maybe a little time for online social time with friends, or making and eating dinner together. Chores and putting away laundry, maybe watching a quick TV show before bed, and or having some social time with friends, maybe online. But again, you want that to be not right before you go to bed, or some alone time. These are just some ideas, a sample schedule. And why would it be good to write it down? Well, having kids write it down for themselves helps them take some ownership and starts to help them create some independence. And that is actually good executive functioning. It is planning abilities. Can I plan my day? Can I reflect on what I think I want to have in the day? And where would I fit that time in the time schedule? Even young kids could draw some pictures about what kinds of things they want to do in their day. But as you get older, you get a bit better at doing some of these things. And so you want to really flexibly adapt to these changing stressors, knowing that we want to stay connected with other people, and we want to adapt to the changing policies, and remembering that even some simple things like making a routine for your day can make a very big difference. So these feelings of anxiety that you may be feeling can be very frightening, but in fact, they are not going to give you a heart attack, or they're not going to cause you to have damage to your body. And Dr. Pincus will now tell us about the importance of connecting with other people. And again, I know that this can't be through hand-to-hand connection or giving hugs, but there are many other ways to connect.
So connecting, that is really when you look on TV or on the internet, there's a lot that's being said about we're alone together. We're alone together. The message really is that we need each other. As human beings, we're supposed to be together. We start out in tribes, and this is not normal for us to not be able to be with each other. So we have to find different ways to be able to connect. Spiritually, with our religious community, there's been some creative ways that churches and synagogues, Unitarian fellowships, houses of worship that are various cultural institutions have done things online. Easter, there was a service on television from St. Patrick's Cathedral. So there are many ways that we can stay connected spiritually to other parishioners, other people who are in our parish, by connecting with them by phone or by emailing them, and especially with our spiritual leaders, our rabbis, our priests, our reverends, are people who want to be there, and that these are leaders in our community that are helpful and help us to reconnect with that inner resource that we have. That's a very important part, because it gives us a feeling and thoughts of meaning. Viktor Frankl is a man who was a survivor of concentration camp, and he looked at what is it that makes some people able to cope better with adversity than other people. And what he discovered was the people who were coping better were the people who had some meaning. They created some meaning to the suffering that they were going through and the struggling that they were going through. And so, you can take a look at this experience of dealing with the stressors of a pandemic and what benefits did I gain from having to learn better ways of coping. I've become more resilient. I've learned how to become more creative. I've connected with people I didn't have time to connect with before. I've started a new hobby. So I've made some meaning out of this. That's a positive meaning for me. I've connected with friends and family in different ways. I've learned different ways to do that. And also with my neighbors. So just to share with you, one of the things that I did was I put a big teddy bear on a chair on my front porch with a sign that said, "We're all in this together, welcome." And so people wave when they pass by, or children take a look and say, "Hey, listen, look over here, there's a teddy bear here." And in some states, I heard that people are putting teddy bears on their porch, and when parents take their children for walks, they count the teddy bears they find. Like, this is what I see. So being friendly with neighbors is important, because neighbors are also a support for us. They're support for you, and you're a support for them. Our colleagues and our coworkers become more family to us in realizing the meaning that they have in our lives. So reconnect with them, even though you're not working alongside them. You are able to work alongside them by using the internet, by calling, but not only in terms of work-related issues, also because you care about them and because you have a personal relationship as well. Find some help if you're experiencing a problem that's causing you more anxiety and impairing your ability to function. That help comes from people in your family if they're listeners, but if they're not, because they're also overwhelmed, you can call a parent, you can call one of your spiritual leaders. You can also call any of the people who are support personnel for your school system. You can call, there are hotlines that you can call if you just look at your Suffolk County. And we want very much for you to know that there are many excellent resources for help that we've listed here with regard to the coronavirus that you can check in on. So we want Dr. Donna Pincus, who is a former graduate of Connecticut. So wonderful to be able to partner with you and work alongside you in providing this special presentation. And I want to thank all of the people who've participated today. Donna and I hope that you can look at these ways of coping and managing stress and build on them in your own family, and then share them with other people. Thank you so much. Stay safe and be well.
Thank you so much.